couple of minutes or journey.
Yeah, then move to
There's a big funeral. Well, I think they've got some groups over the Rose Fair and stuff.
Yeah. There's not harm in writing. I don't think there's anything relevant to it, but you can just say yeah.
Right, we've got some fresh air going through the room now, I take it.
Quite a lot out in there.
Welcome to the meeting. First item is evacuation procedure. A fire drill not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once outside the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door which you have entered the room, or by fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure that your mobile phones are off or turned to silent. And I'll advise everybody that all of this meeting will be recorded for future broadcast. Item number 2, apologies. I believe we have one apology from Councillor Tandy.
Councillor Tandy.
And we have Councillor Watkin, who is chair, is substituted for Councillor Tandy.
Okay, thank you. Minutes. Apparently we've got to agree all these minutes.
It's not there.
Halton Communities, 22nd of March.
It's not there.
The sign was
It's gone.
do you reckon anybody was there or?
They don't have to be, the members don't have to be present to move them.
Okay.
I'll move them then, Chair.
Now.
I was there also. This way. This one. Planning and Environmental Review Scrutiny Committee. Same for that. We can
yeah, Chair.
agree to that. Thank you.
I'll shoot it up there.
And economic, I know.
I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you.
How so would it go down?
Got one as well.
This thing down. And we don't just know it's sure. That's how sorry. That's how sorry it goes. That's when I will be back here.
Right. Declarations of interest, party or what, other than the ones that have been known. Yeah. No. Right, item number 5, public consultation. We have, in actual fact, we've got Mr. Baxter, who's at the back of the room, and part of what he's, I don't believe he's here to speak to anything, but because his item that he's interested in is practically the last item that we're going to deal with, and that's the forward plan. Would it be advisable to take that just now and deal with the other things later?
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea.
And everybody's,
Yep.
everybody all right with that? Okay. Page 66. We have already indicated possible dates for this panel to have a look at the various subjects, as you can see on page 60, is it 67? 66, 67 onwards. Does the panel think that this is the right order that we should take these things, or should we move things around, or what do you think?
The
Councillor
forward plan isn't about when this committee considers items. I believe you're on about the work.
What's on the work
agenda.
programme?
Work programme, which is different.
Yes.
Slightly confused which one we're looking at.
Okay. My fault then, I thought we were. Right, again, the addendum, sorry. My fault. The panel has been asked to discuss purpose of the report is to inform the panel of the new scrutiny arrangements following departure of the head of democratic services. In Appendix A, all the domestic arrangements outlined in support developed for democratic services scheme are available, etc., etc. Anybody would like to make any suggestions on when things should come to the panel? I know that Mr. Baxter is here for, if I can get to it. The very last item, drift arm review. Mr. Baxter produced a report some time ago, and very interested and very informed that it was. But since that time, the decision was to try and get a working party set up. There was no working party set up. We tried 2 or 3 different attempts in order to get a working party set up, but there was nothing happened. Does the panel still want this to go forward as a working party or not, or whatever? Mr. Ross?
Just before the end of last year, I know Shirley sent to all of the independent members a huge volume of documents and what have you, which were really very, very detailed on the new arrangements for scrutiny. And at that time, we were to have a training session on that, but that didn't materialise. And I do think if we're all part of scrutiny, then I think we should have some sort of training involvement or introduction, because it is really very, very detailed, and there, you know, quite considerable changes within that document.
Councillor?
Thanks, Chair. In relation to that specific item, I think it should be left as an item to be discussed at some point, bearing in mind there was a big team set up for dealing with the issues around the Nuneaton town centre, and whereas at one point we used to always consider things as Nuneaton and Bedworth, I think perhaps we should leave it in there solely for that purpose. And just generally overall, I think we're all on a steep learning curve here with the new setup of scrutiny. So I'm happy that we note that the things are here that should be coming forward.
But
Move that, sir.
yeah, but On that point, the review is supposed to be in July 2018. Do you still want it to be July 2018, or do you want the working party set up in order to report back to the panel? Or
I think practically, Chair, you're not going to be able to do it for July. I think probably September time, and that'll give you a chance to put something together.
okay, then what? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the Griff Arm item, I think the council now has a number of new members who may or may not be interested in that particular item, so it may be worth someone from committee services perhaps emailing out to all members again now to ask them they'd be interested in serving on a working party on that front. If not, because I think last time the challenge was that there weren't enough members who were interested in doing that particular item. But as there are new members, it may be worth another shot. But in relation to the overall item number 10, Chair, I do have great concerns about how we are going to do all these items. There are, in the remaining 3 meetings we have left, if we stick to schedule, about 19 items for us to review. If we're going to review them and do the job properly, I don't see how we can do all that in 3 meetings. I understand that Councillor Condacourt has asked for grounds maintenance and the 2018 comes as a separate item. And I also note that it is on here at monitoring of Glendale contract and put in for 15th of November 2018 as the next time we review that. As far as I'm concerned, that's completely insufficient. Since the election, I would say almost every single member has been bombarded with issues about Glendale, and I'm now starting to get issues about refuse collection, with complaints not being answered after 18 days and counting. I would actually move, and this was what was put forward to us at the budget and other meetings we've had. We have an extraordinary meeting of this committee before the end of July, specifically to consider the Glendale contract and its monitoring, because it is now fresh in the memory of residents and of councillors. By the time November comes along, our memories will not be as fresh, it will not be as immediate an issue, and perhaps we now need to look at this stage in preparation for next year, if there are any improvements which can be made. And to go with that, I would also suggest at that meeting we look at the actual tendering process which we're going to go through, because I think there may be lessons which should be learned to go through into the tendering process. I don't think November is good enough, Chair. It needs to be done this side of summer, and I would move we have a meeting before the end of July.
Before that's moved and seconded, right? Can we deal with Mr. Baxter's query first of all? Does the panel want a working party set up in order to have a look, come back to this panel at some time in the not too distant future? We'll deal with that one first, and then we'll do the second one.
Chair. Talking on the specific thing that you're asking for, I would first of all say that, being as Mr. Baxter's here, let's have an update of him. Then I would get second Bill's proposal to put it on later, because we can't do it in July. And then, as Chris has said, open it up to see if there are any legs for people putting on to do another working party. So there's 3 different things there.
My understanding is that Mr. Baxter never wanted to speak at this meeting today, and also that the stuff that he sent to us in the past can be resent to everybody on the panel to see whether anybody else is willing to sit on the working panel to bring it back at a further date. Does that seem the simplest way out?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I think put it to
Everybody aware of what's happening? That the papers will be set out once again because there's loads of new members, and out of that we shall try and get people to sit on the working party, which will refer back to the committee, and then Mr. Baxter obviously will have another chance to speak at the panel. The working party is going to be set up and then back to here. Actually keep people fully informed of what's happening. Everybody in favour of that?
I'd vote for that, Chair. Can I just say that the last time the attempt was made to form a working party, I did have some individuals in mind outside of the council who have expressed their support for the idea of that sort of development. I walk the canal once a week usually on an extended walk I and others do, and some on that walk had quite deep knowledge of the history of it, and I would be interested to see if I can't persuade one of them to come on to a working group, because I think it would add considerable support to it.
Well, taking that in mind,
Yeah.
Councillor, and we get the working party set up, I'm sure that whoever's going to chair that would actually propose something along those lines
Yeah.
for somebody to come to speak to the part of the evidence. Obviously,
Yeah.
we would assist or not assist Mr. Baxter's case. Yeah?
Yeah.
Deal with it that way? Everybody all right with that then? Okay. Right, second part, the Glendale contract. As we've suggested and seconded that we have a special meeting called of this panel before the next one, before the next timetabled meeting. Councillor Condacor, I believe you wanted to speak on this item.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's most disappointing that we actually had the 7th of June meeting deferred, because that would have been a good way to have already lost 3 weeks doing nothing. At the time, after the elections, we had the portfolio holder write on Facebook comments about him taking action and sorting things out. That had 198 replies on Facebook, which was sent out as part of this work request, and 50 on the Bedworth forum. So there was a massive interest in actually talking about the Glendale contract, and there is massive risks. So obviously, the Glendale contract is our biggest contract. About £1.5 million goes straight in the Glendale contract, plus a lot of other work, you know, Christmas trees, etc. It's a massive contract, and we're just not supervising what's going on. There are, I say, risks from the contractor going under or we needing to terminate the contract. There are risks from actually robbing one part of the contract to keep another part of the contract going. Already we're seeing litter bins not emptied as people are diverted to do the grass cutting. Everything is now being done on an emergency basis, so whoever shouts about A problem or B problem, they get some work done, which means that something else doesn't get done. I believe every council is getting lots and lots of complaints, and this needs talking about now, both from a short-term point of view, a resilience point of view, so that if it all goes pear-shaped we know what our contingency is, and from an early planning point of view, because a lot of the issues like the hedges and overgrowth, we should have cut back in the winter. Cutting them back in the summer means cutting them back by hand and very carefully because of birds' nests. We need to actually start to make sure we're in a good place, so actually early we plan to do a big winter cut back and actually next year not have these problems. At the moment we have a slight drought which will ease some problems, but we shouldn't actually forget what a mess the borough has been for the last 2 months, and we shouldn't let this happen again. And I hope, Chair, as a person who's paid to run Scrutiny, this won't be shut down and put off to September, and actually we will talk about grounds maintenance in a couple of weeks, as Councillor Chris Wilson suggests, so that we can get to the bottom of it quickly and have the people involved tell us what's going on. Thank you.
Councillor, as part of your suggestion for the work programme, you've included some bits from Facebook. My understanding that this is a closed group, and unless you have asked every single person on that closed group, that can't be submitted in front of this panel. Have you asked every single person in that group for permission to put their names on?
The people were, I was only told this afternoon, and the people on that group actually responded to a message from the portfolio holder. So it wasn't a piece where they didn't know they were responding to the council. The council's portfolio holder actually wrote a message on there, and 198 people responded.
So, in other words, you haven't got permission from those 198 people?
So we are now going down to not discussing it, because we're discussing discussing whether those 198 people have got permission to have a thing they wrote on a public site discussed, rather than discussing Glendale. This is the usual distraction technique.
Councillor, this is not a distraction. We're trying to get this correct. If the panel agrees to a special meeting will be convened. What we're asking now is, under the laws of the land, unless you've got these 198 people in a closed group, not a public group, a closed group, permission, we can't accept those papers that you've submitted today.
The important point is, do you accept that 198 people made a comment? What their comments are is fairly immaterial. The point of submitting them, and you didn't need to publish the 198, is to actually show a lot of people were concerned about this. It's the size of it, so I do not need the panel to consider or take those 196 in detail. I need to just accept that there was 196 comments.
So, once again, you have not got those people's permission in order to put them in a public document.
I didn't put them in the public document. I admitted
This is a public,
them as an attempt.
Councillor, this is a public document that's in front of us at the present moment.
My form stands.
The form stands, but the addition to it, as far as I'm concerned, will only note there's 198 people made comments without everybody being included in, well, we haven't got the permission, have we?
It's only evidence. You don't need
I'm
to.
just saying. Any members of the panel which say anything in this? This is my what you got, under the whatever the GDPR, Data Protection Act.
Yeah. So, Keith, was that 198 people or 198 comments?
198 comments.
So it wasn't 198 people that...
Without being over the 198
comments.
I'm told that it's under that act we can't accept it.
But those comments have gone to the portfolio holder.
Just saying, it is what it is. It's anybody else on this one particular matter? Richard Condicor, did you ask whether you wanted to speak on this matter or not?
Yeah. I mean, my comments are just generally more about, how this is going to work, and I don't think it can work and things. It's very, very worrying as a member of the public, reading, with the reduction in resources available, there will be an expectation that scrutiny panels will seek to undertake deeper investigations into fewer issues of interest. Then there are so many issues of interest. To say that half of them can't actually even be looked at scrutiny is very, very concerning. When it came up at the budget and things, I was concerned then. I raised it at Cabinet and things because, scrutiny is the way, the only way that us members of the public have any means of actually making comments or feeding into this process. We're getting completely sidetracked and things. And then the next bit that says the emphasis of the new arrangements will be on the chair and vice chair to drive the scrutiny process. That again makes me absolutely go, whoa, because the whole panel should be doing that. And I have concerns also by the size of the panel. With this number of people who want to make, if every one of you wants to put your 2 penny worth in, which, I hope as elected members you actually do, you're going to be here all night. The average scrutiny panels that I went to in the past, when we had 3 panels, the average length of meeting was 2 to 3 hours. Now those 3 panels have been put into 1, and it's just absolutely ludicrous. I don't understand why you couldn't say, okay, we've got to save money, and I understand that aspect of it, that the chair of any committee gets paid half of what they were previously, and we have the same number of things. It's just a ridiculous situation. And then I find issues like, Glendale is a big problem. If you go, all the local areas seem to have their own Facebook forums. Weddington and St Nicholas, every other post is about the problems and things. It is a real concern, and it's just getting pushed under the carpet. You know, I get very, very frustrated. You know, as a member of the public, I'm very limited as to what I can do. I mean, I'm in a better position than most because my husband happens to be a councillor. So I know a little bit more than, you know, the average person. And, you know, this scrutiny, the way the scrutiny is going is just very, very concerning. And I think the whole thing needs to be looked at again. As, you know, Councillor Wilson's already said, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of other of you, you know, have the same views.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Cunningham. I should perhaps say this, Mrs. Roach.
Well, in view of the fact that there have been these comments on Facebook, can we actually acknowledge, you know, that it is quite serious and that it can be recorded somewhere?
Well, that would be up to the legal department.
Can't we do that? Can't we in any way? No.
You've got to ask for everybody's permission in order to publish it. That's what I'm for.
We're not asking
No,
to
but
publish
you're
it.
not publishing the names.
It is published. This is a public document.
You're not publishing the names, you're publishing the fact
No.
that 198 people.
No, there's the papers we've got in front of us says different, doesn't it? Yeah. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I do take the point about GDPR. I think most of us in most public sector and private sector organisations are somewhat baffled and bemused by some of the GDPR regulations, but they are what they are. And when I've gone through some of these screenshots which Councillor Concord has put in, I actually know some of these names because some of these names are my friends. Now, if we're going to have a wrangling over whether we can consider the item on a purely technical issue, then I think that is doing a disservice to both the councillors who have had God knows how many complaints from residents, and also to the residents themselves. But perhaps we can square the circle, as it were, by not admitting the work item as Councillor Condecourt has put down on that basis, but cover it under the work item which I mentioned, which is already on here. These pages aren't numbered, it's under Appendix B, where it says about monitoring of Glendale contract. We can do it under that issue. So if that's the way of squaring the circle between the work item and actually doing it, I'd rather actually get something done, ignore, well, not ignore because it is an issue, but ignore the procedural issue about what Councillor Condecourt has done, because I do think there is a procedural issue there in GDPR, having known some of those names. But I think my original motion still stands about bringing that monitoring of Glendale contract forward to before the end of July, and also bringing into about the new contract specification which will go out to tender in time to be able to set it up from November 19, something like that. I think we need to do that ASAP because it's such a hot topic, and that's the way around getting around this impasse.
Councillor, I personally don't have any problems with that. The only problems I had was under the GDPR thing.
Well, just outline the way around.
That's either one way we're at, well, I presume the panel's going to sit down and have a look at this problem. It's part of the work programme, we want to bring it forward, we can bring it forward, I don't have a problem with that. I was just trying to get the legal side of that sorted out. We know there's the complaints are there, but this is a public document, and that's a problem that we had. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't think tonight's the time to have a debate about Facebook. If people want to put that on as an item, maybe we need to do that in the future. But clearly, if the Data Protection Act says we can't take account of those views, then I think the very least we can do is make sure the communications team sends out press releases, do whatever, even if it's on Facebook. I don't know whether they can do that. Is to encourage people to put legitimate complaints into the council's reporting mechanism. And I think that's all we can do, Chair. We can't take account of it, that's what we need to do. And if that means encouraging the public to do that, so be it, because lots of things are said on Facebook where they won't be said face to face or even through an ordinary reporting mechanism.
I'm willing to accept all that if the panel is, we're going to get a position to way forward and get genuine comments and complaints and solutions to particular problems we've got, and we can involve the public at every opportunity. I'm all in favour of that. When we're talking about with the current setup with scrutiny, this has been through council. The council have agreed that this is the type of scrutiny that they wish to have. Although I understand that there might be a variation that in the not too distant future, but this is what we've got at the present moment. I agree with everything you're saying, Councillor, and go back to the fact that Councillor Wilson has put forward a solution that a special meeting be called to discuss Glendale and the future contract as well. Is it ASP or is it as soon as possible or
before the end of July while it's still fresh in before?
Sorry, Chair, can I just picking up on that? Obviously, we have two dates within the work programme currently, which is obviously the November date and the March 19 date. If it's your wish to have Glendale come to that meeting at the end of July, then you'll need to amend those dates to reflect that, because they're only contractually obliged to attend 2 OSP meetings a year. So you'll need to decide which one it is that you want them to come to in addition to the end of July.
I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask them to come to this one and the March one. I think the immediacy is now, Chair.
So in effect, Chair, I think what Councillor Wilson is moving is that we amend the 15th of November to the end of July 2018 in the programme, basically. I think that's what he's saying.
Chairman?
Oh, Councillor.
I think the point that Councillor Wilson was making actually was not only to bring that item forwards, but also to include, and potentially on pink papers if necessary, actually include the potential future contract for the next stage of our grounds maintenance programme as well, in addition to the monitoring of the current contract, but also the going forward and the shaping of a new contract, as I understand, for November 19, I believe.
I don't think we can do it at the same time, Chair. I mean, there's no reason why the panel can't request that, but I wouldn't do it at the same time for 2 reasons. One, as you say, it'll be a confidential item and it would have to be a separate report. 2, we obviously wouldn't want Glendale to be present for that discussion because, of course, they can't know.
You can just ask them to leave once their item's been considered.
But yeah, we'd have to do something like that.
So, what's the panel's view? Do we call for the special? Let's.
Chair.
Whoever spoke there now.
Before we sort of commit ourselves to this meeting, so far I think the idea is we have a meeting to discuss it, but I think we need to split down the subject into what particular issues in detail we would like addressed at the next meeting, because I don't think it's a good use of members' time or officers' time for that matter to be informing ourselves in these meetings. It's like in-service training or whatever for councillors. I think we ought to have the information which we base our scrutiny on before the next meeting, so that the meeting time is actually spent homing down the issues rather than finding out what the issues are.
Thank you, Chair. I hope we can have the extra meeting. I'd like Glendale to come because I'd like to ask on the last minutes that we've just accepted, 3 parts of the way down, I'd like them to answer a few questions basically on the Glendale Live. Glendale Live was made to the panel focusing on the effectiveness of real-time working, scheduling and monitoring for the Nuneaton and Bedworth contract. Obviously we're not getting it, are we? So can we have them to explain? And why aren't we cutting the grass correctly?
Anybody else? Final? Councillor Bowman and Councillor Watkins.
Thank you. I can remember, as has been referenced by Councillor Guttridge, the problem that was presented by Glendale at one of the meetings in the past 12 months, maybe past 18 months, which was they had this super duper system which would let any resident put in their postcode almost, pick up what was happening around them as far as the Glendale contract's concerned, and have a direct reference in front of them online to tell them when and how work was supposed to be carried out by Glendale. I'm not aware that that has been happening, and that sort of oversight by residents rather than councils would have been quite interesting to see. So I do think that we are owed some explanation as to how the contract is monitored by us, by ordinary members of the public, as far as Glendale work's concerned. But I must say, this I think is typical of the contracting method which councils are forced to undertake at times of austerity, times of reduction in grants which we get to provide public services. The resilience is gradually squeezed out of the contract, particularly when you get a 5-year term and then a renewal and then another renewal. And I just can't see how that is consistent with what we've witnessed this year. Record rainfalls, floods, all sorts of weather that we've had up to now, and then we get a drought, and now we're told it's going to be well into July before we see any rain again. Well, when you present me as a gardener with those conditions, I say to my wife, I think I'll give it a rest here, you know. And Glendale isn't afforded that opportunity, and on top of that, its money's been squeezed by consistent financial pressure. The danger, of course, is that you lose Glendale. Now, Glendale is a fairly big organisation, I think, and it covers many areas of the country. That gives it some resilience. But if in each area of the country they're being squeezed by the same contracting pressures, then there will come a time when you lose major contractors, and it has a severe impact on the service which the public expects from its councils. The money is less than the expectations people have of the contract. It is really difficult. So I think something that reflects on where we are in that process of contracting and the financial pressures that it's produced would be a useful paper to bring to this committee, because you've got to have some perspective of how this comes to be. I don't think the contractor wants to provide a bad service to Nuneaton and Bedworth, but I do think the financial pressures have to be taken into account. And the other thing I would say is the portfolio holder has issued and taken very strong action to try and get this contract back in line. And I think that needs time for that simple management pressure to have impact as well. It's very easy to say things aren't happening. I'm very unhappy about Bulkington. Some of the planting has been quite poor in the middle of the village, and we've got the carnival coming up on Sunday. Won't be very good, because they've only just put the baskets on the hangers, and they've only just started feeding the plants. So, you know, there are aspects to this where we need a fairly broad view of what's happening. I'm not sure that a timescale in July fits the bill and gives us a chance to evaluate properly the information which we want and the result of actions which the portfolio has taken.
Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mine was pretty much along them lines, because we don't actually know what the portfolio holder had come out of the meeting yet, so he's not told us anything. So we need to find out what actions are coming from that meeting first before we try and do anything. I too, Julian, was a bit disappointed with this Glendale Live, because it sounded marvellous, to be honest, but not seeing it come back. And you will all know, because you've all seen the photos that I've sent of the state of Kingswood. It's not the best at the minute. and we're not getting there. I just don't know the value of bringing in an extra meeting at the minute until we know what has come out of the meeting in portfolio order.
Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I agree with what Councillor Watkins said, that he's concerned that the portfolio holder hasn't been sharing enough information with members at this point. Secondly, going back to a few points that Councillor Beaumont raised, I don't think the main issue here is the financial strain, because we're talking about the fact that we're paying them money to do a job that they're not doing. I mean, we're not getting our money's worth from what's being paid, and before we talk about giving Glendale more money, we need to make sure that they're spending the taxpayers' money properly as it is. I mean, for example, we haven't even had flowers planted in Bedworth Town Centre yet. We've got some great arrangements of soil in the town centre, but no flowers yet in the main area. We've also had the same issues where it's basically a laughing stock. They're going over, they're not picking up litter when they do the grass cutting. They're leaving cemeteries in a mess, which a lot of residents are very unhappy about. All of this needs to be discussed rather than saying, oh, we need to give Glendale more money. I mean, lots of residents and people who travel say that Glendale do a lot better job in other councils where obviously we have different contracts, so we need to be learning from those other councils instead of them just Glendale just assuming they'll get the contract over and over again. We won't improve. I really hope that the management pressure that the portfolio holder is putting on will work, but only time will show on that, when we need to know as members more of what's being done. So I really think this needs to be discussed in a meeting of its own that residents can come to and know with a peace of mind that the council is taking action on this very important issue.
Chair, it's important to say nobody said we should give Glendale any more money. That's what the councillors just said.
Councillor Pomfret says we won't give them enough.
Councillor Pomfret, yeah, indicated.
Financial
pressures.
Oh,
Councillor Beaumont.
Councillor Beaumont, and I apologise to Councillor.
Well, I don't think Councillor Beaumont was saying that. What he was saying is that public sector contractors, and I don't know the ins and outs of the situation with Glendale, what role the financial situation is playing in the way they operate on the ground. That is perhaps one thing we ought to put on our list of questions for Glendale. They might have problem recruiting labour, for example, or at least keeping it. I don't know. But nobody, as far as I know, has suggested giving Glendale or anybody else any more money for anything.
Mrs. Ross.
Chair, I sat on the working party for Glendale, looking at ground maintenance, and we did that over a long period of time. And I know we did visit, we did actually go out to Leicester, and we looked at Coventry. We did look at how other authorities were working and how they produced their contracts and so on. And I thought that we had produced and for committee, for cabinet, a very, very good contract. And you know, sort of each time I come to a meeting, it looks as though it's being added to or subtracted from or whatever. The contract seems to be changing somehow or other. And I think, to go back to the Facebook thing, are we to say we fought for a long time again for feedback from the public as far as Glendale was concerned. And the cards were sent out, or at least they were supposed to be sent out, and we got very, very few back. Are we now saying because of legislation now we can't even have these feedback cards, we can't read those or produce those either because of legislation? Because, everybody, we all learn from our mistakes, so Glendale have to learn from their mistakes, so the feedback has got to go back to Glendale.
Yes, I understand all that, but on this occasion, that it was a closed group, it wasn't a public group, etc., etc. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Carrying on from what Councillor Beaumont said, I did ask if the residents could get on Glendale line, and I was categorically told no, we had to go through Paul Daly. So I've been going through Paul Daly. It's all right, mental block. But no, right, going back to them saying, I think we ought to have the meeting ASAP because we were told that Glendale were working overtime and there was extra staff employed to carry out the operation. So A, has that been done? And B, have they done it?
And who's paid for it?
Councillor Sergeant.
I mean, there's one thing, I think, you know, I mean, I've travelled around the country as a lorry driver for many years, and you see Glendale in lots of towns and lots of cities, and they do a lot better job in other towns, and they seem to have a lot better equipment, so they have these fancy ones that fly the grass down a little bit more so there's not the big clumps. And I think the other thing to remember is that, you know, most people put their lives on Facebook, okay, and when we're complaining about Glendale workers, they're also on Facebook, aren't they? So basically they sit there, and if people were complaining about the job I did, I'd probably sit there and think, well, okay, you know, why should I do overtime? Why should I work Saturday? Why should I work Sunday? Because they're probably only getting paid single time for it, so they're not going to put themselves out, are they? Because so from their point of view, from the workers' point of view, they may be looking at their management and saying it's actually the management's problem of Glendale, not ours. You know, we're not being managed properly. So there may be some issues there with people putting information onto Facebook, which are, you know, it's generally putting the workers off, isn't it?
There's still,
Thank you, Chair. Just going on this, I mean, at the moment, Glendale are working to what the contract says. The contract at the moment, they're working to. The new contract that we're coming in, you've got the power to make sure you've got the right details in there for the jobs that we want doing properly to be done. At the moment, the existing contract has to be the one that's existing. We've got no choice. So when you're looking at a new contract, that's when you can get in there what we want doing, i.e. all the nitty-gritty. But at the minute, you need to turn around and say that, you know, Glendale have got this extension and we're all looking into it, but this council is also to blame. Because as a resident, I know that you've got wild meadows, but we don't all know that. So we don't know that you've only got to cut that metre width and the rest of it is all wild meadows, because you've never told us this. And I've brought this up at meetings with Phil and Paul Daly before. So if people aren't aware of what the commitments are, Glendale aren't doing a good job, because in people's eyes, they don't know that they've only contracted to do that metre width. So the contract at the moment is not suiting purpose, but it's the contract you have got, that is the contract you have given Glendale. You can then look at the future contract for new future contractors, whoever they may be, and then you can put in there the nitty-gritty. And I agree with you, it's downhearted that, you know, when you're somewhere and somebody is dissing you all the time, you lose your will to do anything. But at the end of the day, if they're adhering to the existing contract, you lot are to blame because you ain't got a good enough contract. So at the end of the day, just get what you can out of this existing contract so you can get a new contract out there that is suitable for purpose. Thank you.
Councillor, what I'm going to take 3 more speakers, then I'm going to try and wind this up a bit, because we're either going to have a meeting to discuss all this stuff, or we're not going to have a meeting to discuss all this stuff. We might just be going around the stuff that we're going to be talking about in a couple of 3 weeks' time. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I accept the point about you get what you pay for. However, the question that many residents are asking is, are we actually getting what we pay for? Because, and the portfolio holder actually said it in his statement on Facebook, which no member of the council had signed up before it went out, so we were as completely blind as any other resident. He actually said in his statement that Glendale are not matching their performance under the contract. Surely that is something we should be looking at. He has said that, even though 6 months before, at full council, he had said Glendale is performing. So there is that issue about that deterioration in the performance of the contract. And then I accept the point about the portfolio holder, we should wait and see what he said. But surely the point is, if we have that scrutiny meeting by the end of July, the portfolio holder should sit in that seat and say what has happened in that meeting, what's been done, how he's monitoring what's been done, and where we're moving forward to make sure that the contract is upheld moving forward. That is what scrutiny does, that's what portfolio holders should be expected to be answerable for, and that is our job. So it's not enough just to deflect it and say, oh, we've got to wait and see what the portfolio holder says. It's our job to ask him, it's our job to have him here and say, what have you done, where is it going wrong, where's it going right, and how can we stop this happening and move forward? If people are afraid of doing that, then they shouldn't be on scrutiny. So let's have the meeting and ask him those questions and ask Glendale why they went off track, how they're coming back on track and how they intend to stay on track.
Councillor Grant.
I was going to say most of the same points that Councillor Wilson brought up. Just like to say that I agree to some degree of what excuse me, Mrs. Bryce said, because I think that the contract does need to be looked again and possibly amended, and I think we need to look at other councils' contracts. I was in Cherwell which last week, which I think is a Glendale job, and they're doing a great job there, and I speak to the Glendale workers when I see them when out and about in the wards. I don't think there's any real incompetence on their part. I think them as workers, as individuals, are doing as good a job as they can, but I think there is a massive problem with a lack of communication within the organisation, because there's had to be several rectifications done just because the workers were told to do one thing and then a few days later they were told to do something completely different. Just thinking specifically of a situation where they were trying to erect a fence, and they were just told to erect the fence. They weren't told to put concrete foundations in, so they had to stick up the fence, put in concrete foundations, and because they didn't have enough time to collect all the rubbish, there was a lot of rubbish left in the field. But that's not down to workers, that's just down to communication problems within the organisation. So we need to find out, you know, are these problems across the organisation as a whole across the country? Is it located specifically towards Nuneaton and Bedworth? So I think we've probably spent enough time talking about, talking in this meeting about having a meeting to discuss what we've brought up at this meeting. So I think we should just call for the meeting and talk about it more then.
Councillor Watkins.
Right, I'm just going to make a few factual points and then that's it, I'm done. About the areas, yeah, I've got residents telling me all the time that it's done Borough down Weddington and St Nick than it is in Kingswood, so that could go wherever you go, wherever you walk you'll hear that. For new members, just to explain about Scrutiny, we're an advisory board, we can't actually make any decisions in here, so we're just advisory, we can ask for things to happen. We really do need to make the complaints procedure work. It is much easier now. So we need to be directing all the people, all of your ward people, everybody you know that's making a complaint to you, direct them to the complaints procedure. I do. And if they don't do it that way, and then I'll do it for them. You can easily do that. It's about take a photo, put the complaint in, put it through, but at least it gets a reference number and everything, then it goes through the proper procedure. So, and I often do that, don't I, Phil? So, the timing of the meeting, even if you was to call for a meeting now, there's no saying that Glendale would be able to do it, because they're probably out there doing the job that we're asking them to do. So what I'm going to move, and finally wrapping it up, is that we ask the portfolio holder for a briefing of what came out of the meeting, and see what questions members have got from that briefing from the portfolio holder. So I'll move that.
I think that could be included as a friendly amendment to Councillor Wilson, but Councillor Wilson would say no.
But you're asking for an extra meeting?
Yeah, I was asking for an extra meeting. Philip, you said you wanted to say something?
Yes, Chair, just a couple of things. Just to understand, I think following on from Councillor Pomfret's suggestion about scoping, that if the meeting is approved, that you're looking for specifically a report that's dealing with financial pressures, Glendale Live and its effectiveness, grass cutting in particular, which is a particular issue of note, cemetery and cemetery maintenance, contract monitoring arrangements both by client and contractor, and then just something general about financials and generally what the position is as far as the funding of the contract is concerned, and value for money. Are we getting value for money from that? I just also wanted to say one other thing, Chair, in terms of these comments, that the working group that you were on was looking at the new specification, which is the one that will be coming into effect in November next year, which is when the new contract will come into effect. We will be bringing a report, hopefully, to Cabinet in July, which is to kick off the procurement process for the new grounds maintenance contract in accordance with the new specification. So it kind of dovetails in a sense that the second part of your request about seeing the specification. The only thing is, Chair, I wonder whether in reality what it would be better would be to have a briefing for panel members on the new specification rather than anything else at this stage, given that we are kicking off the process next month. So there's not really going to be much scope for doing anything with the spec going forward. It's already been through quite an extensive working part of the process in any event. So without sort of reinventing the wheel, what it would be to perhaps identify what we are looking to do going forward to address some of the issues that members feel are some of the shortcomings in the current contract. And I think Lynn's absolutely right. There's a difference between poor contractor performance and a specification that isn't fit for purpose. And I think you have to understand the difference between the two, because in some cases it will be because the contractor's failed to do something. In other cases it'll be because that's what the contract requires. And I think you know that's a very subtle difference between what one is acceptable and one's not. But members of the public won't understand that distinction, and we probably haven't communicated that in sufficient detail to members of the public, so we're not managing expectation. And that's something that we do want to look at going forward. I don't think I want to say anything else other than to pick up a point Councillor Kandaka made. They have a completely separate team that deals with waste bins, and my understanding is that team is still operating at full complement. So if there are bins being missed or being overflowing, then that's obviously more to do with the supply rather than the emptying potentially. So we will look at that just to make sure, but my understanding is that those bins are being regularly emptied. So if there is an issue, it's probably, as you know, we've had some issues with parties in the park and things which have caused some problems. So it doesn't necessarily mean that things aren't happening, and they may be happening on the frequency basis that they're set. It's just that the amount that's being between emptyings is greater than that which would normally occur. Which again is back to the specification.
That's very relevant as far as I'm concerned, is that we're not here to micromanage the authority. We're here to look at policies and to see whether the policies are working. That's what we're here for. And if we're talking about this particular policy on a single item, which has been suggested, all means let's turn around and do that. But I wouldn't want us to go back to a system where we are micromanaging everything, and everybody's got complaints in about Heath, Poplar and various other things all over. That's no, as far as I'm concerned, part of what this scrutiny panel is about, and maybe part of the evidence that's used in order to change policy, which I'm all in favour of, but just it's my opinion that we shouldn't micromanage everything. The suggestion is that we have a special meeting and ask the portfolio holder, along with Glendale, along with Glendale?
Yes, I'd assume that you would want Glendale to come along, and particularly because Councillor Guttridge has raised some very pertinent points that they need to respond to.
I guess. Because when I come in front of the panel, I actually thought that was all good ideas.
I thought it was a wonderful idea, but obviously it doesn't work.
Yeah, well,
and I did ask a question at full council.
So, Councillor?
On a specific point, may I test the will of the panel on the point raised, and Mr Richardson's summary was incredibly helpful, but there's one point, particularly on the agenda point, that I want to raise and potentially put to the temperature of the panel itself. I don't think this wide discussion about national pictures, etc., is incredibly helpful. It's going to bog down on time, where we'd rather much more get into the detail of the contract as we have, and I do wish to test the will of the panel on that particular point.
I actually thought that's what we were doing.
On the specific agenda item that Mr Richardson raised, I want to test the will of the panel on, in addition to the principle of a meeting in July.
Any opinions?
I think there should. I think the committee should, just for background and for preparedness, if you like, to give Glendale and the portfolio holder a reasonable meeting to attend. That the background of finance from interlocal government and the pressures that have been interpreted and placed on grounds maintenance contracts would be useful. I think this business of a 5-year contract, and then at the end of it you take things out of the contract, you reduce the resilience of the work which they're expected to do, and then experience extreme weather conditions. I think there's something to be said about that. You know, I do think that is a real problem. Because if you've got to start recruiting extra, I mean, what about Brexit? Do they use?
Brexit. Oh, come on.
Do they use labour from abroad, European migrant labour? And do they not? You know, I think that's quite a useful thing.
Councillor, I don't think we'll be bringing up the Brexit situation.
I don't mind.
But it's relevant to the borough. The contract will hold.
But there is a background of every time we try to reduce or make our money reduce, our costs reduce in line with the latest grant from government, which could be as many as 3 or 4 weeks away from when we declare a budget. You get into discussions with contractors about what you can do and what you can't do. And that's no way to plan resilience in the contracting that you're doing.
And that, councillor, I would suggest is part of the overall, the bigger view that people can take or they can't take.
Right, okay.
Right. Councillor Watkins.
Just on Phil's scoping, just to add 2 points really. One was about the shrub beds, and the other would be about the contract with the trees, because people need to know about them 2 different things as well.
The
trees. Tree contract.
Tree contracting.
Tree, yeah.
Anybody else?
Can I just ask, picking up from Councillor Beaumont, the contract, has it changed? They've entered in, I believe, a 5-year contract, is it, Glendale? And is it changed from last year to this year? Are they on a fixed term, fixed rate or fixed job to do what? Can we have some clarification, please?
Let's get clarification at the meeting then.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what having a meeting. Have we decided to have a meeting?
Is there time to fit it in July?
Yeah.
Councillor.
Chair, I'm almost totally confused. I think it's quite right that a meeting should go ahead. I don't know whether it's an amendment or not, but I'll move that a meeting is arranged to discuss the Glendale performance at the earliest opportunity, and that date be agreed in the normal way through the chair and the officers of the council.
Is that fine, a seconder? Yeah.
Madam Chair, that meeting be no later than the end of July. I still believe Councillor Wilson had a first motion.
Yeah, I understand that, but you've got to take that.
Councillor, I think what Councillor Hancock is moving is an amendment. It's whether Councillor Wilson wishes to accept that as a friendly amendment, in which case it can become a substantive motion to which another amendment can be moved, or whether or not you want to take a vote on that. And then
you really should be a clerk to the speaker. It's like having procedural advice in the Commons at the moment, isn't it? As I understand it, Councillor Hancock has left it open-ended as to when that is, and that wasn't the intention of my original motion. He just said a date to be fixed in consultation with the chair. The original motion was to specify by the end of July, because it is an issue which is relevant and current now to residents, and if we don't do it now, then a lot of the issues which we've encountered will be forgotten and subsumed by other issues which come up.
My concern with that is whether we can get the relevant papers set up in order for that short time period. If it was to go on a wee bit further than the end of July, and I'm not saying September, October or whatever, is that we can get all the relevant papers and all, and I'll make a friendly suggestion, and what do you call it, and the chair and vice chair. We'll look at this and try and get it into the work program, and into the work program as soon as we can get everything up and running.
I still don't think that deals with the timescale issue, Chair. The issue that you've raised about pulling the papers together, as the report quite clearly states, that is now an issue down to the Chair to make sure everything is arranged, and that's now in your court to do if that's what the committee wishes to do.
With the exception, Chair, of the contractor. But I don't think there's any issue about us being able to pull the papers together by the end of July, but whether or not we can get the contractor here, we don't know. So if you want to keep it at the end of July, we'll endeavour to do it by the end of July, but I can't guarantee it at this point.
Well, a timescale helps focus the mind for contractors, and they know it's a very particular issue for residents here. I would think from a PR point of view, it would be in their interest to attend.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Maybe, but I still can't guarantee it.
So let's go back to the suggestion is that we'll have it before the end of July, on the understanding that we get the contractors here also. Yeah? Because there's no much point of us talking into thin air again and discuss everything we just discussed if we have nobody here that can actually pick up a shovel or handle a spade or whatever you want to do. So we agree with that then, as a panel?
And omitting the November meeting, Chair.
Yes.
Is that agreed, Chair?
Everybody all right with that?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Majority. Right. We have other things on this. To discuss.
Is the rest of the programme agreed?
I don't know.
Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask about the Gresham Road? On the last Planning and Environment meeting we had before we went to this new scrutiny idea, we were told, and it was on the Waste Street cleaning operations, review of Gresham Road would be on the June 2018 work permit. Now I see we're going to be pushed back now to March 2019. That's, on that it says 2018, on here it says March 2019.
Certainly does.
Can you ask why?
Unfortunately, Chair, Glenn Hooper's not here, so I don't know the answer to that.
Can we find out? What's happened there? I presume you want brought forward to the next.
I truly hope so, Chair.
Okay. So what date? So
it was scheduled for June 2018, which is the last day is tomorrow, I presume. And we now push back till March the 21st, 2019.
When would you like it, Chair? I think is the next
I presume at the next scheduled meeting of the panel, yeah?
Is that September?
Yeah. You want that in September then? That's the next scheduled meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else on Councillor Grant?
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask a question to the panel, and of course yourself as Chair, regarding the item on the Borough Plan and 5 years land supply target, I met with Catherine Morton the other day, who said that on the inspector's timetable, it's quite possible that if the council votes for the amendments that are likely to be put forward, and the plan goes into consultation again on the main modifications, then the consultation could be ongoing from the end of July to early mid-September. So do we want to discuss this item before that potential consultation could take place or afterwards?
I would assume that it would be afterwards, because we'll be discussing something that we don't know anything about.
In that case, then the scope and the title of the item would have to take into account the consultation, and I don't know whether we want to talk about consultation separately as a different agenda item, or whether it would come under the monitoring of the delivery.
No, the thing is, I really think that we should stay focused. I really don't want to keep going back on ourselves. If the information's there, let's have the information in front of the panel, rather than saying, well, it's not there, but then again, we'll have to wait for another 2 weeks before the end of then we'll discuss it again. No, I think I would sooner have, as soon as we've got all the information in front of us, let's deal with it then, rather than the off chance that somebody might say something that we don't like or they like or whatever. Just seems a bit confusing. Anyway, Councillor Wilson.
I accept what you're saying about not going backwards and forwards, etc., especially where the borough plan is concerned, because it's done that God knows how many times.
Yeah.
But there is a fundamental point here, is that the way that it's worded on our work programme is it's left open-ended, whereas we are expecting, and the officers are briefing us on the basis that we will have the inspector's report in September. Yeah. Now, surely, as a committee, we should be planning. Well, I was told by Catherine Morton we should have the report from the final report from
the final report
from the inspector in September, unless that's changed. Then surely we should be looking at that sooner rather than later as a scrutiny panel. Now we no longer have the 3 separate scrutiny internalised panels, and we're all one. That is an item which is very important to thousands of people across our borough. And to leave it open-ended, I don't think is acceptable. I think we should be looking at September, November at the latest to consider this, or maybe even looking at another meeting, because that could be, depending on the results that the inspector brings forward, a very big item, and have massive repercussions for our residents. We've just vacated an item in November, for example, to have an extra meeting, so there's a slot there which you could now potentially fit into, although I still think that's slightly late given the report will be September time. But we can't leave that one open-ended. We've got to be mindful of the timescales here, and residents deserve to know that on one of the biggest issues that will shape the makeup and the fabric of our communities from now until 2031. That's a big issue, Chair.
November might be okay, Chair. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what that review was intending to achieve. I don't know whether it's something that was put on some time ago and it's just been rolled forward. Where we are is obviously in the middle of the examination process, so we are not in control of the process or the outcome of that process in so far as it's in the hands of the inspector. As Councillor Wilson says, we would anticipate having a report back from the inspector, we hope, by September, a final report. We're expecting the initial report next month, and we think we'll be taking a report to July Cabinet prior to doing consultation. So quite what the panel is hoping to achieve at this point, I don't know. I can see the point that once we've got to a point where we have a final document for adoption, that one of the things the panel will want to look at is going forward, how we're going to monitor and ensure that we've got accurate and up-to-date data on supply, and obviously there's there is a requirement on us to start doing 5-yearly reviews of the plan in any event. So as soon as it's adopted, we're going to have to go straight into a review process anyway. So I can see around November will be about a good time to be sort of starting that debate and discussion internally to see what needs to be put in place going forward. But prior to that, I can't see anything, any real point in it.
All right. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Chair. Philip was quite correct in what he said, although the Borough Council still has some part to play in this, because it will still be something for, I believe, Cabinet to be voted on before to go to consultation. The consultation will, of course, be administered by the Planning Department of the Borough Council, so there will be some thing being done on the Borough Council's end before September on monitoring the delivery of the Borough Plan. So I think that it's still worth discussing that when we bring up the Borough Plan at this October, September, November, towards the end of the year meeting.
Councillor Watkins.
Chair, you've just heard the facts off legal. There's nothing that you can do anyway. It's already in the hands, it's doing its process. We've got to wait for it to come out of the process first. It's got it marked on here, it's an overview. It's not a scrutiny, it's an overview. So November it will fit in. There's nothing else we can do until it's been gone through its inspector's stage.
Everybody happy with the November date then? We'll get it in the diary, and once we get all the facts. Anything else for this? For the so we can agree with everything else that's on here, and we'll take it forward from there then, yeah? Okay, thanks for that. Right. Does that mean we'll go back to item number 6 then?
So the report that starts at page 24 is basically an overview of the outturn of city's performance for 2017-18. And last year was the first time we taken a different approach to our targets. It was a more focused approach, so we had the short-term sickness target and the long-term sickness target. I'm happy to report that we met that target. The report also includes various benchmarking and some analysis of our sickness stats. Happy to take questions or queries.
Any questions or queries from the panel?
One thing I was going to ask is that it was really sort of about holidays and whether there's any times that people can't take holidays. Because what we found in a place that I've worked previously is that they ban holidays in December and they ban holidays around the Easter time. So basically the sickness level just went sky high.
Yeah, I mean, we departmentally there might be times where we can't rely on leave. Yeah. This doesn't include any analysis of that. Right. But we do have differing annual leave years across the council. So some are on January to December, some are on April to March, some are on birth year. So it helps manage that, you know, because perhaps there is a trend where people run out of annual leave, so they go sick. Yeah. But we don't have those issues because we have so many varying leave patterns.
Any other members of the panel? Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask on page 33, days lost per employee? Under 20s, do we employ many people under 20s?
Not many, no.
I am absolutely astounded, because I'd have thought with apprenticeships and the future of the different departments, we ought to be looking to encourage more apprenticeships.
And we are working on that. Apprenticeship levy is within my remit, and we do take on apprenticeships. We've created 6 posts within customer services that are new start apprenticeships. But apprenticeships are not defined to any age group anymore. Anyone can apply for an apprenticeship, so we can't govern who applies for that post.
How reliable is the benchmarking data?
In terms of against other councils?
Yeah, well, I presume you've got these from other councils. How reliable is it?
As reliable as the information they've given me.
Oh, thank you.
They do have to report it in the same way that we do.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to look at specifics at page 32, chart 1, appendix E. I'll give it 1 second just to turn to the relevant page. Yeah. Specifically looking at musculoskeletal conditions, actually. And what I find interesting is that the trend we have here seems to be the exact opposite of what I've experienced in industry within musculoskeletal, in that in the period running up to winter, between September and September 17 and January 18, we actually had a decrease in people going off because of that, whereas usually in industry I found it to be the exact opposite, because people in the warmer weather tend to be better for musculoskeletal. But also, so a question on if we've got any data and specifics on why that may be, and the particular high point in the sort of summerish, late summer time.
National trend would indicate that actually it's the opposite. People become more active in drier summer weather, and therefore might be a bit more energetic and hurt themselves. I'm trying to be diplomatic here, and musculoskeletal absence does also include operations for musculoskeletal issues, and where people can, they do tend to take those operations during the summer periods.
Just one other observation on that, and perhaps something we can look at in terms of how we're supporting and perhaps taking preemptive measures where we can, is actually, there seems to have been, if you compare the start of April 17 to the end of March 18, there seems to be a 300% increase in reporting conditions of this, the start versus the end. And I do worry whether when we look at this in a much more macro, a much more macro picture, and we look at it over a longer period, potentially when we compare last year and this year, we're starting quite a high point for the start of this financial year compared to the start of the previous financial year, and perhaps we could have at some point some information about preemptive measures that are taken to look at that and look at how we can look to offset that. That would be my biggest indication from the members we've got.
Most of musculoskeletal is not work related, so we do have an ageing workforce, and specifically in some manual areas we're not able to offer the same alternative duties to get people back to work quicker than we are in other areas. So, well, I would say that since in the new financial year we've put in more initiatives in terms of wellbeing days. We've had physio come in and done triage sessions and things for musculoskeletal, so we do try to offer advice and guidance.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the same page but on cough, cold and flu, I was just wondering, do we offer any flu vaccinations for staff, or is that something we can look into? Because obviously there are a lot of people who actually go out in the cold weather, particularly the frontline services. And I know some businesses and public sector organisations offer that. Is that something we do, or can we look at offering it in the future?
We've done it in the past, and we find the uptake is very, very low. And generally a lot of people are actually able to go and get them anyway, free of charge, but we find it's generally, the uptake doesn't warrant it really. We've even had like vouchers that go down to the local pharmacist to have the flu jab. Half a dozen, we've had the uptake.
That's an interesting point, that was,
yeah, but the rise this year, that was generally a national trend.
Yeah.
There was a lot of cough and
It
cold.
was a very nasty flu virus that that just reflects that trend.
Yes, and we do things like we send out, communications about the catch it, bin it, kill it sort of campaigns and things, just to remind staff.
How long ago was it that we did it, just out of interest?
Flu jabs, probably the last time that we offered the pharmacist route was about 3 years ago, I think.
It was about 2 years ago, because I arranged it.
Yeah.
11 people took it on.
It was not a lot at all.
We did discuss this at management team, because of course one of the things we wanted to assess was the cost effectiveness of carrying it on, but given the low numbers and the cost that it was costing us to put it in place, we took the view that the number of people that were suffering with particularly flu was very low, and therefore it wasn't cost effective to do. Ironically, as you'll see, we picked the wrong year, because then the following year we get the spike, but we think that might be a one-off. In addition, as Ruth says, Chair, a lot of our workforce are eligible anyway for free flu jabs, and we encourage them to take that if they are, but of course
Councillor Watkins.
I was going to say about 3 jobs anyway, but also we have in the past done some work with the Sharp Foundation where they've come in and done some health checks and things like that for free. I was wondering if you was thinking of taking that up again. I know that they're eager to do it, and I can always pass that information on for you.
We do a programme of health checks and wellbeing days with the sports development team internally and the Healthy Living Network. We've actually just launched a Couch to 5K programme as well with the Healthy Living Network. So we do offer quite a few health checks. By all means, if you have contacts at British Heart Foundation, the more the merrier. But yes, definitely.
Well, because I also remember when we done the Wii Fit and what have you in the chamber, that was quite good. Get people active and doing things. Also, do you still promote the walking at work, where you used to walk around the park and things like that?
Yeah, we do.
So they're still doing stuff like that. Yeah, can do as much as you can really.
Councillor Hancock.
Chair, can I move that we note the report, and within noting that report we recognise the initiatives taken in regards to the workforce attendance.
Can I find a seconder?
Mr. Chair.
Everybody in favour of that? Okay. And as far as apprentices are concerned, you're shoving against an open door with me, because I was an indentured apprentice once upon a time, so I'm more in favour of apprentices.
Yeah, and I was.
Yeah, okay.
And I was Chair.
There you are then. Right, thanks for that. Item number 7 then, capital and asset strategy. Les, do you want to report and then?
Yes, I'll just introduce this. The report you have is an update that gives the current position with the asset management action plan that takes us up to the end of this year, 2018. If you have a look at the report, there is quite a lot of green in there showing either completed or we doing what we should be doing, and there are some that aren't green. So by exception, I thought I'd just talk to those that aren't green, and then if you have any other questions arising after that, I'd be happy to field them, if that's okay.
So that's the case. I've got 2 speakers. Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I always think these reports are incredible because almost everything is normally green, because every year we change the dates by a year. So disposal of council house, the number of times that has been reported as being disposed of is remarkable. Every year it's going to be disposed of just after the local elections, and yet again we find it's green. These things every year roll on, and they're always green because we can just change the date on the plan to the next year's date.
It's developers, isn't it?
There is a lot of stuff on here which is really important for raising capital receipts or providing housing, like the depot. And one on here that's particularly interesting to me is the Camp Hill stuff, because that can provide a lot of housing, particularly affordable housing. And in this report it says measured targets, number of properties, all these things on this report. But we're not on this report getting the numbers. Yeah, how many houses have we built in Camp Hill this year? Yeah, the report is very sketchy. And yeah, it's on page 42. It's got number of houses provided quite clearly as the measure, and it's got green. But we know the Camp Hill project's suffering, and actually they're having to change some of the affordable housing requirements, so actually the later phases won't have the affordable in. So we know there's issues, and yet everything's green, and we're not being told how many houses are being provided. I'm really concerned that not criticism of Les Snowden, but we've only got one Les Snowden, and so much on this is officer time, officer time, officer time, and we don't have a machine to clone our officers, so I don't know how we're going to get this vast amount of stuff all done in very short time scale, when most of these projects seem to be getting stalled by various external factors. I think I'll leave it there, other than to say, yeah, this does need a good look at, and we do actually need a report that actually tells us honestly what's happening with these things, rather than green, it will be done in August, or green, it will be done in December. because that's far too sketchy. And as we know with all council plans, they just slip a year, then slip a year, then slip a year. Thank you, Chair.
Mrs. Pondicott.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick out a few bits that I noted as I've looked through the report. Page 37, the second thing down, says, and it's something that Councillor Guttridge has raised and things. It says about that St Mary's Road still being used as waste transfer site pending granting of site licence for Gresham Road from the Environment Agency, expected by end of June 2018. And it sort of implies that that bit's green. Well, the end of June is Saturday, so has it actually been done?
Sound green.
Who knows?
Want me to?
The other thing I wanted to sort of highlight was on page 42. Work to secure development of Abbey Street car park, former Gala Bingo Hall and Kingsholm Public House. On the customer focused outcome, it says now progressing Abbey Street car park only. Now, as a member of the public, this just sort of concerns me, I think, because Church Street car park's going because of the McCarthy and Stone development. The implication here is that the Abbey Street car park is going ahead for development, and we'll lose that and things. Now, as a Green, would rather everyone's walked and cycled or got the bus into town, but I'm realistic and know that that's not going to happen. And even when my parents come, obviously, we do then drive into town. So it is a question, where are people going to park? Because, all right, there's the Harefield Road multi-storey, but multi-storeys are not very sort of, I can't get the right word, but particularly if I was going down to town of an evening and things, I wouldn't want to be in a multi-storey car park. On page 43, the identify and assess suitable sites for NBBC to, if necessary, purchase and carry out residential development to allow open market sale or leasing of new properties to NABSAR. Well, I agree of the view that if council is going to carry out residential development itself, it should be so that it actually increases its lot of housing that it's got and things. The fact that then they would sell them or lease them to NABSAR just seems particularly bizarre to me. What else did I pick up on? Page 46. Compile a schedule of NBBC-owned pavilions, community centres, etc. and things. Surely we should have that already. Things. I would have thought that should be an ongoing thing that should have already been in place.
Okay. Any members of the Parliament panel wish to speak to the report? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Grinan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm assuming that a copy of this can be redistributed when the new responsibilities are assigned due to the management changes which have gone on, because technically the report isn't now up to date because of Alan going and redistributing that. I do still have, as Councillor Guttridge and Mrs Condrickle has raised, I still have serious reservations about the Gresham Road depot. It's expected by the end of June. By any stretch of the imagination, we are very far behind, because we were told we would have a licence at the back end of last year, and we're now into the middle of this year, and it seems to be an ongoing saga. But one thing I do want to raise is on page 38, which is to procure operational vehicles in line with rolling renewal programme and operational reviews, and it's marked as green. Now, Glenn and I have had a bit of an exchange over this because of issues which are going on in Whitestone, but we're needing to purchase more vehicles because the fleet is ageing. We aren't being able to meet all the routes we are supposed to. That is causing delays and disruption and inconvenience to residents. So surely that should be marked as an amber, because we aren't yet now with a new functioning fleet of vehicles, and it is now having an impact on the routes. So I accept there are reasons behind it, but if we are giving an accurate reflection of where we are with our estate and the issues going on, to me as a layman, and particularly that one resident who's complaining to me, if she read this report, she'd be going through the roof. So I think that should be amended to amber, Chair, because it is now causing an issue for residents. I accept the stuff going on behind, but we need to give a true reflection in the papers.
Can you deal with that particular point here?
Yes, certainly. Since the report was, or the target was sort of allocated, we have since put nearly £1 million worth of capital order for the purchase of 6 new RCVs that will sort of bolster the fleet and hopefully enable us to operate more consistently and preempt any issues that may occur, and offset that by the purchase of new vehicles. So I take the point that it's green, but that was because it's green because we purchased the vehicles. I don't know that.
Okay. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to raise everybody's attention to page 43 of the report, where you talk about identifying and assessing suitable sites for the Borough Council to purchase and carry out residential developments. I assume that council housing is a different item, but both, of course, are important for several reasons. I would argue that this should be moved to amber rather than green, because while I can think of some examples of this taking place, and of course being on the planning committee and being an avid reader of the weekly planning lists, I do see that this happens. And for example, from the social housing point of view, we've got what's happened on Anderton and Whitburn Road in Bedworth. But I just don't think enough about it's happening, particularly with areas that are in a quiet state. For example, we've got one place in Bedworth, Joseph Luckman Road, where we've actually got some, the Borough Council owning some land which is fenced off. It's a mess. It's going to cost the council money to clean that up, but it's their responsibility because they own that land. Whereas there's actually land adjoining it for sale, so you've got a potential development opportunity there, which, if we were to provide a modest number of affordable NABCEL or social houses, would help regenerate that area considerably. Of course, we've raised this issue before at full councils as a question. We've met with Catherine Morton, Planning Department, about this both on-site and off-site several times, but I think that now this land is for sale, that's a unique opportunity for the council to consider, and I'd like to argue that that be noted in the report, in addition to the report.
Les, do you want to answer that first?
I mean, I'm not familiar with the piece of land entirely that you're referring to.
It's the fenced-off land by Bedworth Arms.
Oh, the piece at the back?
Yeah, that's all fenced off and a bit of a jungle.
I mean, we have tried, now you remind me, I can be a bit more specific about it. We have tried to acquire that piece of land over about the last 5 years. It was held by a company that went bust, and through various stages was disclaimed and ended up as part of the Crown Estate.
Yes.
And we've tried to engage with them to buy, but they're not prepared to deal with us. But if they've now appointed an agent to actually sell that piece of land, then we can re-engage. I wasn't aware that
we've seen it advertised in the last few days, so it's worth looking into and investigating it.
We'll look into that, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question in relation to page 38. It's the same section as Councillor Wilson spoke about, and a comment, if I may. I see that as being green because that process is going through it about the replacement stuff. But I'm looking for some positives in the sense that, and I think it happens in a number of areas, and I'm not going to be parochial about it happening in mine, but we have a particularly, an area that's particularly difficult for on refuse days to get a big vehicle down there. So I want to be sure that we take into account when we're renewing vehicles, not just renewing them, but renewing them with vehicles that will take account of the road network. I mean, in that particular area, we're also in dialogue with the county council about trying to do some works to the road itself. But the question is about we may need some smaller vehicles, particularly refuse vehicles, to service particular areas.
Excuse me?
You want to answer that particular point?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, we have done that, Councillor Hancock. We've looked at the locations that have caused us the problems. Obviously, we can't fill the fleet with smaller vehicles, then we wouldn't have capacity. So what we've done, we've taken advice from a number of other suppliers and a vehicle that we procured last year that is a short wheelbase rear steer, which allows greater flexibility of the vehicle to enable us to get into tight areas more often. Obviously, some areas you're not able to get into and we have to go back, or some areas have to be serviced by a smaller vehicle. But the latest procurement has a short wheelbase rear steer on them to allow that greater capacity.
Okay, thank you. And a comment, please, Chair, because I'm extremely concerned on occasions when Councillor Condacor comes that appear to be with some conspiracy theories. And I was concerned tonight to hear him, maybe I got the terminology wrong, but I'm pretty sure I heard him say that what he really expects is an honest report to be produced. To me, that's an implication that the report's dishonest. And I don't believe that's the case, Chair. But that implication is there, and I think Councillor Condacor should put out a public apology if he's implying that officers are presenting us with dishonest reports. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to seek some clarification from Les Snowden on page 46. It's reading about possible rental sale values and disposal of assets, which just would like to see the schedule of MBC-owned buildings and just to get some indication of which assets we no longer require.
Yes, we can provide that to you, but outside the meeting. I'll have that sent to you within the next few days, if that's okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, I've got a few points to like to one is on 40, undertaking complete review of options being put forward by the development of land at Vicarage Street. I'd like some sort of up down, not heard of for a couple of years now. The other one would be the one at Abbey Street. Again, like some sort of, it's got anticipate completion by 31st of 12th the 18th. Again, I've not heard anything. Promote and develop the use of pavilions. That was what I did that work. That work group for. So to compile a schedule of MBC, we've already got that. I've got a report. I can't understand why these things are actually on here. We've got it. So it's not ongoing and green, it's done. One I would like to, and then the last one that I'd like to ask questions about is commence work on site to redevelop the bus station site. Again, I've not heard anything about that either.
Knight or Virginia Secure?
Yeah, these are mine, Chair. In terms of the schedule that you referred to, it is incomplete because when we did the piece of work with the working party, we compiled the schedule, but there's additional work attached to this that is still to be done, which is around some of the valuation work. Some of the valuation work being done as part of the annual asset valuations, but some are exempt, so we haven't got all of that information. So there's a small amount still to be done to complete that entire exercise. So we're showing it as green with ongoing work and that we will hit the target. In terms of Vicarage Street, there has been a lot of work ongoing on Vicarage Street. If any of you have been around there, you will have seen that we've been undertaking site investigation works, we've done topographic surveys, we've got our planning guidance. At the moment we're looking at soft market testing, so talking to developers who've engaged with through MIPIM and MIPIM UK and other contacts, so that it enables us to pull together the right product, the right proposal when we go to the market to seek a development partner in the early part of next year. So there is still some work to be done around how we bring the site forward, and we need to do some work around procurement and the best method to bring that forward and achieve what we need to do. So there is a lot of work ongoing, and it's always now sitting under the Transforming Nuneaton programme umbrella.
Councillor Graham.
Oh yes, I was just very quickly following on from what Councillor Elliott asked for. I was just wondering if Les could make that information available to all of the members, because I think some would be quite interested in that.
Yes,
yes.
Councillor.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Can I ask about Gresham Road, expected by the end of June 2018? Have we got the licence?
We haven't got the licence at the moment. We are working through recommendations and requirements for the fire prevention plan given to us on a Schedule 5 from the Environment Agency for the authorisation to be signed off. That work is currently being undertaken, and I have got confirmation that once the work has been completed, that the requirements from the Environment Agency will have been fulfilled. I've sent a number of communiques to the Environment Agency to gather an update over the last couple of weeks, and I'm still awaiting a reply. The end of June was a realistic target when I was given that assurance, and I will continue to chase the Environment Agency for a decision based on the work that we're now undertaking.
Thank you, Chair. That leads on to question 2 on page 38. So we're not on target then for disposal of St Mary's Road by mid-July.
We are on target to complete the sale of Gresham Road by mid-July. All the conditions. St Mary's Road. All the conditions on the original contract have been met, and we envisage that it will be completed by the middle of July. It needs to be the middle of July because the contractor has pre-work that needs to be done to enable them to start on site shortly thereafter.
Can I just add to that, Chair? We did write into the option agreement that there was some flexibility so that if we were required to sell by a certain date, we could still require, I think it was up to 3 months occupation of the depot if necessary to allow for transition to Gresham Road. That was done right at the beginning. We didn't know at what point we would be in terms of the project at Gresham Road, so we wanted to put some flexibility in. So that flexibility is there. So we're not in a conflict situation in terms of not having a site to move the waste disposal facility or the transfer station to yet. I'm not saying that I'm touching wood here, but we hope that when we've got the licence in place and be able to make that transition before that bite. But of course, that's our intention anyway.
Can I just another point, please, Chair? I fully welcome that we are purchasing some new waste recycling vehicles, dust carts, etc. When will we be receiving them, please? Or when will they go in the fleet?
We're hopeful by November.
Thank you.
If I may come back to a point just made a moment ago about St Mary's Road and some additional works being, I did the opposite mistake. Gresham Road and some additional works being required in order to meet the standards from the Environment Agency around fire. When you say additional works, are those policy and written policy works, or are they physical works required on the depot?
Physical work.
Is that cost then built into the already 1.8 are we at now £1 million overspend, or is this additional costs that weren't envisaged in those figures?
It will be an additional cost.
Do we have any figures on what those are so far?
I don't at the moment, because Mr. Glenn Hooper is the lead officer who's arranging the contract.
Anybody else? No. So can we move the amendment cabinet to who the panel the comments have been presented? Can we move that up? All right, everybody. Right, item number.
Just to be clear, Chair, are you now recommending that to Cabinet?
Yes,
to sign off? The Cabinet signs off.
Yeah. Are we all right with that?
Chair, could I just ask, yeah, I'm happy with moving that forward, but there were some other questions I asked Les. I don't need him to answer them now, but if you could circulate them to all members really.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Vicarage Street, Abbey Street, bus station.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was actually thinking of that. That was the idea.
No, he done Vicarage Street.
Yeah.
Got cut off. But if you could just all three sites really to all members.
Right, then, yeah, everybody happy with that, yeah? Item number 8 then, performance reporting. Philip?
Thank you, Chair. I was assuming that Linda or Steve would be here to present this report, but it's different format. It's an experimental format that you have, and part of the what we're asking the panel to do today to comment on the format, whether it's clear or not. We've been testing it in various different groups to see what the view is and whether or not there needs to be some improvement. So I can tell you without shadow of a doubt that the little text boxes on the right, which are microtype, will have to be enlarged. That has already been noted, so I'll just relieve you of the burden of that particular comment. In terms of the actual report itself, what you have is the strategic performance report that normally goes to management team, and ironically, the one benefit of having a single internal panel is that effectively you're managing the entire suite of services and functions of the council, so you actually get the full recording in terms of the reporting. What we're trying to look at is trying to bring the key indicators though, because I think if we brought absolutely everything to the panel, it would probably be in excess of 100 pages long. And so what we're looking at particularly is exceptions where things are out of kilter, or things that need to be looked at by the panel because there may be some anticipated issues in the future. For example, they might want to think about doing some scrutiny work, things like that. So just looking at finance, Chair, I think the only thing I would, looking at page 51, I would just flag the reported variance that we're experiencing, particularly on the housing revenue account. And you'll see that the dotted line is the 1718 variance. What we're experiencing is what we think is going to be an emerging trend for some time and we place this squarely at the feet of Universal Credit, that there will be greater emerging problems in terms of rent recovery. And so as part of our strategy for dealing with that, we are looking at how we configure the teams, particularly in finance, who do the recoveries, and we are focusing now specifically on rent recovery because the impact of that is going to be quite significant. If we look at the other, I think most of the other ones you'll see are either on target or above target, so I'm not going to say anything about that. And as you'll see, the rent collection on the bottom of page 53, there you can see the scale of the problem between where we were last year and where we are this year.
Sure.
It's quite significant.
Okay, I'll just
Yes, I'll stop.
I've got two speakers first before the panel. Councillor Condicott.
Thank you. We have very good performance reports in the past that are very detailed and went through the markets, the city hall, empty homes filled up, all sorts of things, and went to the 3 different panels, and all that information seems to have disappeared in terms of the performance of each particular part of the council's 3 functions. Now, some of that is still online. If you go to Nuneaton and Bedworth.org.uk, the council's performance system is actually online, but it's not being presented to this panel for comment. And things like Glendale, markets, car parking, that data could have been presented in a performance report. And there's some of the things that are going good or going bad at the moment. We actually seem to be doing a bit better on car parking, but none of that is actually coming to this panel. We're only getting this cut down version, and I understand the point we don't want 104 measures, but if someone had actually put 104 measures down, we could have actually said, as a la carte, we want to look at these 20 things, because these are things we know are going to be impacted by the downturn in town centres, etc., or the pressures on housing. And I mean, I'm particularly interested in the empty houses. Also, on page 50, there's this strategic block which says how many things are green. And an awful lot of red. On improvement, we've got 1 out of 4 measures green. On process, we've got 3 out of 5. On people and service delivery, 2 out of 4. 3 out of 6 on finance. So there's obviously a summary there of things going on. But actually, there's no text then on that little bit to tell you what are the 3 performance improvements that aren't going. You have to look at all these IM1s. It is not a very, very clear thing, and particularly in black and white. And are they as of May, or are they actually end of March but reported in May? There's a lot of questions, and I really do think we need to go back and look at the old performance reports and see which things are still worth monitoring. And they used to have very useful text to actually say, yeah, car parks down or up, or it was a late Easter, or we've lost an awful lot of performance data. And I get brought up horrendously on when I talk about honesty and clarity and transparency. But actually, if we're not giving information to people, that means it is not a full and frank picture of how the council's doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, again. Mr. Condicott.
Thank you. Just a few bits I wanted to pick out that I sort of want to comment on. On page 54, status PS2. I mean, the recycling and compost rates seem to be going down rather, steeply. Now, we did have a harsh winter, so I'm sure that, does play a part in things. But I'm also concerned that it's going to remain low, because we've certainly had quite a few weeks where we've had, delayed collections. Now, we don't produce an awful lot of, waste and things, but a lot of people do, and they'll be just chucking, if their green bin's not been collected, they'll be just chucking it into their black bin. And I know people have said to me that they're not prepared to pay for their second green bin, and they'll just get rid of that into, their black bin and things. So I'm concerned that that is going to go down even more. And on the second little box and things, we haven't even got a target of what we're trying to achieve and things. I mean, all right, they haven't maybe set, well, you must have set the 2018 one surely, and you certainly must have had one for 2017-18, so that's a bit of an oddity to not be there. PS4 on page 55, the amount of affordable housing seems to be sort of below what we want, and I seem to recall in one of the reports to the Borough plan at some stage, one of the consultations, it was something like 48% of people were struggling to afford their things. So to only be getting 23% of affordable, and I use the air quotes because even those are not really terribly affordable, so that is a concern. And the other bits were IM1, IM3 and IM4. I don't understand why the target is only 80%. I know it's very difficult to achieve, but surely on IM1 the target should be 100%. You know, you aim to deliver it all. I know you're probably not going to manage to achieve that, but it should still be the target. Similarly on IM3, health and safety assessment. I mean, it's a lot better than last year, but it's still quite poor. And again, I don't understand why that hasn't got 100%, you know, target, whereas annual development reviews, which do have a 100% target, but surely that's a lot less important than health and safety assessments. So it seems like some of the priorities don't seem to be very logical. Those are the only comments I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the panel? Councillor Grime, you've got your hand up first.
Okay, yes. Just following on from some of the points that were raised by previous speakers, I'd be interested to find out some explanation from officers on a few specific items. For example, when it comes to the recycling, what I've noticed is that there's quite a lot of variance. Let me just find the page it's on so I can... because what it seems to be is that we've had more recycling in the earlier parts of the year than last year, but less recycling in the later parts of the year. So I'm trying to understand the reasons behind that. I mean, of course, we don't want to see less recycling, but of course, earlier in the year we seem to be doing better than we were the year beforehand. So I don't know whether it is issues to do with missed bin collections, or us doing something different, or just different products being bought by consumers. So if the officers could give some explanation on that, then I'd be quite grateful.
Yeah, sort of the waste team's sort of overview of what's happened there is exactly what you've said. It's people not buying newspapers now, they look at their iPads and their iPhones. We've had a higher level of contamination in the dry recycle at the DMR, which means that that's lost the recycling facilities. Obviously, I haven't got a reason why people aren't recycling it as often or as efficiently as they were, and obviously advertisement and communication, ongoing sort of strategies will be employed. I'll go on to talk about the new curbside collection soon, but those have hopefully built-in safeguards to try to maximise what we can recycle. And in terms of yeah, basically we were looking into that to find out why the rates are sort of dropping more often.
Yes, because I was just wondering if there's anything that could be done our end to increase the amount of waste being recycled. And when it comes to these measures that you say are going to be brought in later, I don't know if that's sort of coded for just being commingled, or whether you have something specific in mind with the current services that we have.
For the new contract?
Yes.
Well, I'll talk about it in paper. Yeah, well, there are some things that will hopefully be introduced.
In your professional opinion, do we have anything to be worried about?
No, I don't think so. Okay. I think there's a general trend of lower recycling rates at the moment. We will endeavour to get to the bottom of it and try to bring them back up to where they were and sort of increase.
Good, and I'm looking forward to hearing back.
Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Chair. I don't really think the format of this new report is very user-friendly compared to what we had before. I think if you were to present this to Joe or Jane Doe on the street, or if they were to download it off the internet, I don't think they would find it the most easiest of things to try and follow council performance. So I think it seems if this has just been thrust upon scrutiny as to how we're now going to report performance. I think this would have been better looking at how we report performance through a member working party to see how we do this reporting better, and that may be something we should look at in the future. I think we'd have to wait and see how external feels about their own on that front. But it's concerning, and I actually made similar notes to Councillor Condacor, because there's no reference to town centres, there's no reference to the amount of stalls sold, there's no reference to the amount of income which we're generating there's no reference to the footfall, and that's going to be even more important moving forward, because we were told at the last economic meeting that we are investing in new technology to help us monitor the footfall, but now we're not actually reporting it to Scrutiny, which is something we've been asking for years. So that's inconsistent. We've got car parking, which again is another issue about tickets sold and revenue. We've got the Civic Hall, again another issue about ticket sales and revenues, which should be reported. Glendale performance is another one. So this report leaves a lot to be desired. And if we're only cutting down scrutiny on these issues to 4, maybe 5 meetings a year, it's even more vital that these performance reports are accurate and updated and actually reflect what members want to see, because it is our job to have an overview and a scrutiny of what members do. There's no risk register attached to this either, which we used to have, so we could monitor the risks to the council and see where they were, how we're performing, whether things have moved from red to black, amber to red, whatever. So we haven't got that at the moment before us. But a specific point I want to ask about is, and also there's no commentary with these either. So even if you can't really interpret the data, before we used to have perhaps 2 or 3 lines next to each performance indicator, giving an indication. And we used to have discussions about smiley faces and unsmiley faces, for example, which actually, although some of us would disagree on interpretation, is actually more user-friendly to try and understand as well. But specifically on page 52, with reference to sundry debt collection, how old are these debts? Because I know of at least one incident which has come to me via other sources, where we are now billing people for things which occurred 3 years ago. Now, surely, as well as the sundry debt collection as to how much we've collected, it's important to know how old our debt profile is. Because if we're only billing people for things 3 years after 3 years now, that is both grossly unfair to the person concerned, or the organisation concerned in this case, because they will have already budgeted and profiled for other things, and actually it doesn't throw the council in a good light, because it looks incompetent that it can't bill someone on time.
What?
I don't know the answer to that, Chair. What I can say is obviously what you will have there is, as an invoice is raised, it will then be automatically treated as a sundry debt, and if it goes over the 30 days payment period, then of course it will then be shown as a debt owing to the council. So it will include that debt. I know the case you're referring to, but it will include the debt on the premise that the invoice has only just been paid. So it will go from the date of the invoice, not from the date when.
So we have no indication about what other debts are lingering that we haven't invoiced for?
I certainly don't know. I'd have to ask the question.
I'm confident.
I'll ask a question then. Thoughts?
Can I just ask about the £40 for the second bin? There doesn't seem to be an awful lot of publicity about this, and people have been caught unawares, including myself, I must admit, but I have headline. How and when did it arise? And has there been any response, any response from the public? You know,
The answer to your question, it was a budget decision, I think, made in February Council, and implemented from the second week in June. I believe there was something in touch about it, and obviously stuff went on the website, and I think they put some hangers or something on
stickers on the bin,
the green bin.
Yeah.
So I think there was some stuff put out there. Like you, I got caught out, so I've got a very full green bin, 2 green bin.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, the message is now out there, and I mean whether or not it needs reiterating again, I don't know. Whether query why only when one bin was
Some people have 3 bins, so what happens then?
I'm handing over to Glenn at that point. You pay for every additional green bin over the first one that you're allocated.
Okay.
Councillor?
Thanks. A couple of questions, a couple of points. First of all, in terms of the format, could we perhaps have a little more consistency? I note page 51, the bar charts relate to 16-17 variation period, but the dashed line is 17-18, whereas the rest of the document is the other way around.
Yes, that's also been picked up, Chair.
So that would be very helpful. Thank you for those comments, Scott. A couple of other points of observation and questions. I think noting the points about rate collection, if we go to 53, status F6, you know, we're talking about variations, but let's be clear on what the variations are between years, less than 0.5% in it between month on month. So they're not huge variations, and we need to look at that. In terms of something that may link into that, looking at 54, status PS1 is listed as green, but I note that, and I'm assuming these are new benefit claims which are presented and adjudicated to the council, so I would assume housing benefit, etc. would be the likely side of this. I'm happy to be corrected if that's not, but the time it's taken us, assuming that this is relating to benefit claims put to us as a council, we are actually taking longer to process those claims in 17-18 than we did 16-17. By some about 2 days per time. Again, PS4, Planning Permission for Affordable Homes, is again down, which has already been noted, that I find quite concerning. And I think those would be the main points. Thank you.
Yes, yes, I think it's council tax benefit that DWP deal with housing benefit rights, so we just deal with that. And I think there are some steps being put in place. We are reprofiling the team and doing a restructure because we are framing our activities around getting rent collection in particular. So that we anticipate will improve as far as the benefit claims processing is concerned. We'll crack that once we've got the teams fully staffed up. At the moment, it's
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. So some of the charts are cumulative and some aren't. And unless you're wanting us to add to the recycling bins, I don't understand why we need a chart of every single month for council tax collection business rates. Are we not just interested in the end of year percentage? Couldn't that be combined into one chart?
I think we do that so we can monitor to see if there's any trends during the course of the year. And it was a result of that we realised that we needed to do something with the team within the team to address some issues. So that's how we report it, because that's how we're monitoring it, because it's used to monitor performance within the team.
Okay, that makes sense. And just the second thing is regarding the secondary green bins. I don't think very many people have more than one green bin anyway. Some people don't have any. I'd be interested to know how many people have taken up the £40. If we have that data yet. I have seen some stickers on bins as I've travelled around. So I'd like to know what the take-up has been.
I can get accurate figures and get them over to you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. And just quickly following on from that, could you get those figures over to me as well, because I'd be quite interested.
Taking off the second green bin.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. So yes, thank you for compiling this report. It's always nice to be the subject of an experiment. I think there's a few. Well, there's one thing that I find quite inconsistent. Some of these graphs start at 0% and some start, say, at 30, 40%. I understand that doing that makes it easier to track changes. But I think we need a bit more consistency in the way that we show these figures, because otherwise, you know, you've got one showing data in a completely different way to another way, and it makes things look a lot more dramatic when you're examining it from, say, 94% to 99%. And a couple of questions on recycling. Firstly, I've noticed that there's no data available on this graph for March. I don't know if that was an oversight when putting this together, or whether that, or was that data just not available at this point? And if so, is it now available to us? Because it'd be very interesting to see if we've now, you know, outperformed February, or if there's a pattern emerging.
As far as I'm aware, the data is available, so I'll see if I can get the album to you and at the same time as the second green being upset.
Well, that'd be great, because I'd be very interested in finding that out. And secondly, very quick question regarding what we were talking about before with promoting what can and can't be recycled. Is there an infographic that we can share on social media, or that the Borough Council shared on social media, to help make people more aware? Just think, with all these new community forums popping up, it's worth sharing that just to get it to a wider audience, because, well, you know, not everyone reads In Touch.
There is, but that may change with the new contract, so we've got a communications programme profile to look at that once we've looked at the contracts sort of signed.
Okay.
Brilliant. That's something that you'll continue to share and make available.
Anybody else?
Oh, sorry.
I don't know whether it's in the panel's work programme, but it was alluded to earlier on that the negative effects it's going to have on residents in terms of rent collections becoming more and more difficult to make, and obviously that's a result of people finding it more and more difficult to pay their rent, be it in their private or public sector. And I feel that as a panel we ought to be monitoring this very closely, and I would ask the chair who could ensure that we're having a look at this as time goes by, because as I understand it, that if a tenant fails to pay their rent for a given period of time, it does depend on their personal circumstances, we even have to make them homeless. Is that correct?
Well, we evict them.
Yes. And that will have budget consequences for us as well.
I have to say, we're part of our new remit under the Homeless Reduction Act is to try and not to evict people if we possibly can. So, but ultimately, if there is an issue of rent arrears, persistent rent arrears, and they're increasing, and of course we have no choice but to take proceedings to do it. But it's certainly something to watch, and bearing in mind that universal credit, we're rolling out universal credit out, but it is not everywhere. It's I think it's only something like 15% of our tenants have universal credit at the moment, and they account for the larger proportion of the arrears. I think it's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on very carefully. And in fact, just whilst we're on that point, Chair, just to pick up Hayden's point in terms of the 0.5%, it is 0.5%, but and the ballpark figure is 0.5% of £30 million by the end of the year. So it's actually quite a substantial figure in real terms. So, and certainly to us it is, and to the HRA it is. So yeah, we are nudging around the 0.1, 0.2% to make quite a significant difference in terms of overall rent recovery. So just one to watch, you know, and perhaps at some point we'll give that not just the percentage, but actually what that equates to, what it means in hard cash, because that's really what matters in terms of whether or not we're in a position to spend money on kitchen and bathroom refurbishment projects and things, because that's how we fund them.
Okay, so somebody move the recommendation. So the attached performance report to make any comments on content, but I'm sure there's messages have been sent there. including the most important thing I've told today is about universal credit. We had a brilliant guy come along and told us how wonderful universal credit was, and then we're picking up the figures now, and it's not as brilliant as he's turned around and says. And these facts and figures are in front of us now, and that's part of our overview and our scrutiny plan. And as it says, it shall be discussed at a future panel, because we've got to make sure that what's happening, we know what's happening, and hopefully put things in place to mitigate or assist. And I've got to agree with some of the comments today about the style. I'm not very keen on this style either. So whether anything can be done through the portfolio holder, could you press the concern to the panel to say that we're not exactly happy?
Yes, we'll look at the presentation elements to it, Chair. And I'm just going to, if I can just rehearse the additional elements that you wanted particularly to have on there. I've got markets data, Bedworth and Nuneaton, car parking, town centre, civic hall, grounds maintenance, and the risk register, which I have to say we are in the process of upgrading the risk register to reflect the structural changes that have just been made. So that will be coming to future meetings. But and the point about the commentary to go alongside that.
Councillor Bowman.
Chairman, just remind me, this talking about where information lies doesn't have to be in the report. You can present in the report links, particularly if you draw it up electronically and pop over and have a look and so on. And it would be useful if these figures, which belong to the previous scrutiny, could be available but electronically rather than on paperwork. Used to do a lot of this on the Health and Wellbeing Board at County Council. Minutes from meetings everywhere taking place, and you can go in and read them if you want to, but you never get a wad of paper that you're able to read.
And picking up the point Councillor Dark has made, Chair, we can certainly put the link to our performance management system, so we can actually do the links to some of the more specific reporting that we do there on some of the more very specific things around customer satisfaction ratings, things like that, so that's available. You can still report it, but then you can see live time. So what you tend to get will be a month or two out of date, but if you go on the link, you'll get where it is. Absolutely.
Everybody happy with that then? Okay. Right, we're going to item number 9, forward plan. Who's taking it?
It's for noting, Chair.
It's for noting more than anything else.
I mean, this is the forward plan for cabinets. These are, for new members, we are required to publish a forward plan each month outlining the key decisions that are anticipated in a period up to 4 months hence. So we will, and what we've agreed to do is where we know we've got other decisions, so we know, for example, the budget cycle, which invariably is going to be a key decision, we will put those in the forward plan now for the whole year so that we can populate it going forward. Where we have got key decisions, then of course they should be in there. The other element to the forward plan are the exempt items. They may be, they are there. They may not be key decisions, but they may well be exempt items, and they're there because the law says that we're supposed to give notice of exempt items at least 28 days before the decision is taken, afford people the opportunity to question why it's in an exempt item and perhaps request that it be dealt with as a public item. And there's a process that we have to follow in the Constitution in those circumstances. So I'm not going to tell you what's in the forward plan, but you have a list of up and coming reports there, which some of which we've touched upon already in pre-discussion, and obviously there will be. It's a movable feast. It will change from month to month. going forward as other issues come forward or decisions need to be made.
Councillor Conductor, you're up again.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of points. Obviously, people are new, and the forward plan is very useful for picking up things that are coming up that we should actually make sure we talk about before the Cabinet talks, or consider calling in if they're not good enough. Particularly things like the empty homes stuff is really important, because we're building 500 homes a year, and actually the number of empty homes was going down, is now going up. And our new homes bonus, if we've got 100 homes more that are empty, we actually lose 100 homes worth of new homes bonus. Likewise, if we could actually get empty homes back into use, we actually get slightly more new homes bonus. And I think some of these really important subjects, the Cabinet's going to discuss it. In this case it says July, but I do think the scrutiny panel, as the only scrutiny panel, should actually at least be aware of it, read the report to Cabinet, and also ask officers questions, because as members of this panel, you can actually ask officers to explain something to you if it goes in the Cabinet report. And I think we need to do more of that, and we need to make sure that calling is available on a lot of these important subjects if we're not happy with how things go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Also, one of the purposes of putting the forward plan back onto scrutiny papers was to potentially inform scrutiny as to items it may wish to put on its work agenda. One I think which is particularly important is on page 68, which is about feasibility studies, leisure provision options, and I think that's something that the scrutiny panel may wish to get involved in and have a look at, because the policy has gone through Cabinet from memory, but then there's more detailed work to be done about how that's played out. I think there is a lot of concern from residents particularly where there is an intense amount of development. For example, the 5,000 houses plus going into St Nicholas and Wellington, the 1,500 plus going into Arbury, etc. That the money that is generated from those developments offsets the impact in those localities. And I think we need to be careful that money is spent where appropriately, where that development is incurred. I accept there are issues about premium parks and things like that, because they are issues central to every resident where they have the opportunity to. But for example, being parochial in my ward, the last plain open space strategy says that Whitestone has joint bottom in terms of plain open space provision, along with St Nicholas. Now, if I'm going to be having 621 houses in my ward, I would expect as an offset that money to be spent near my locality and not siphoned off to elsewhere within the borough. And I'm sure residents in other areas like Wellington and St Nicholas, the Woodlands area for example, and I know there are others which are affected. And I think it's important that we scrutinise where this money is going and the facilities that is going to be built as a result of those developments. So I know there was a joint working panel that occurred, but the makeup of this council has now changed. So there may have been different recommendations which would have come forward if the composition of that panel was different. So I think now we have a new council and new scrutiny facilities, that this needs to be put onto our agenda item to look at and monitor, to see that we are getting the facilities we want and need in the right areas.
I have no problem with that. The good thing about the forward plan, as far as I'm concerned, that can actually assist in what we are actually trying to do in scrutiny. Because if we know what's going to come up in the future, if we say, well, can we have a report on such and such, such and such, either just going to the Cabinet or just after the Cabinet, and have informed decisions in. And I always think that's a good thing. And if the new system comes along with more informed decisions and discussions, that's going to be a good thing for the council as a whole. Councillor Watkins.
Just want some clarity really on what Councillor Wilson was saying, because although the makeup of the council may have changed, the plain pitch strategy has gone through council, it's gone through. And also I'm not quite sure on what you're challenging there, as well as in 106 money. 106 money, and Phil correct me if I'm wrong here, 106 money as it's restrictions on where it can be spent and what it can be spent, and parks go forward and put the things forward. But parks will tell you themselves that they're lower down the pecking order for everything that's on that list. So I'm not quite sure on where you're coming from with that, really. So if you can clarify some of that.
You might give
Phil.
Clarify. Philip.
Well, without answering that question, because I'll leave Councillor Wilson to answer that, you are right. There are restrictions, and the good news from your perspective is that any development that necessitates a Section 106 planning obligation, whatever the obligations provide for, have to benefit the development that has generated the cash. So there has to be a tangible link that benefits the residents, your new residents, as a result. So there is. Now, what I was going to suggest, Chair, picking up Councillor Wilson's point, was that we could table this for the September meeting prior to it going to Cabinet, and that gives you the opportunity to feed in and make recommendations to Cabinet. We are actually, at the present moment in time, out to tender to get consultants to do the feasibility work. We've got the strategy is already approved, but what we now need is the meat on the bone in terms of deliverability, and that's what we're looking at the moment in terms of doing some work to pull together how we would deliver the things that are in the leisure facilities strategy specifically. There are two strategies, the playing field strategy, but this one is specifically about the leisure facilities strategy and how and where different developments in the borough plan will contribute things to in order to benefit local residents. I have to say, in terms of play areas, they will be on site and provided by the developer anyway. That's a given, because they will have to provide those. They will also have to provide play and open space. There'll be an open space provision within the development. But this is about the wider offer in terms of, for example, we know that through our assessment of need, that we have to enlarge the Pingle pool. Now, we can't just knock a side out and build on. So what we're actually looking at is actually having a 4-lane pool separate to it, which will be alongside it, and that's what is in the strategy. And what we're now looking at is how we garner the monies together to deliver that. We're fairly certain we can with all the developments, but obviously we need to just tie it together in terms of feasibility. We need to look at the time frames when developments are scheduled to come forward, so we can see how the triggers are hit, so that we will build up a pot of money, and with it, as Chris will tell you, there's a time frame in which we have to spend it, so we have to make sure that the agreements have the appropriate time frames in to allow for us to get the money in and then get it spent. So all of that is something that I think Scrutiny would probably want to see one, what are you getting for that, how is it going to benefit, and what those links are with the individual locations that are making contributions. So I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to have, Chair. If you want to add that to your work programme, that's fine.
Yeah, no problem. Councillor Wilson?
I mean, Phil's covered a lot of what I was thinking. It's also about making sure we have the right facilities in the right place. And I know that, and I'm perfectly aware that 106s have to be spent in a certain way, but the way that the council can do certain things can be quite creative within the rules. So, for example, splitting the north-south divide on the map about where contributions would go, as it stands at the moment, one of the lines is cut halfway through Arbery development. Now, most people would associate that with Nuneaton and not Bedworth, but the council has decided, in its wisdom, to put that part of that into Bedworth so that money could be allocated into Bedworth. The residents in Arbery may disagree with that, and if that was to happen vice versa, I'm sure the residents in Bedworth would have an issue to say about that as well.
I think the answer to that, Chair, is quite simple. It's an economic argument. This isn't about location. I mean, we are talking destination parks and major facilities anyway. I think the point is that whatever we wanted to do in Nuneaton, we can fund. We either do that so that we can use other funds elsewhere, or we don't get the funds at all. So the borough loses overall. That's why it's been done that way. So actually,
It's economically created.
Yeah. But it legitimately are within the rules.
For the benefit of all. So we can agree or move or note whether it's supposed to be the forward plan.
And to add to the work programme, Chair, for September.
Yeah. Everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Item number 11, any other items? I have none.
Chair, may I point of clarification, please? Something's come to my attention that in the agenda item 4, the schedule of interests, my name is incorrectly listed. I wouldn't normally raise this, but the abbreviation K Walmsley actually refers to a family member and not myself. Therefore, I think it's important to point out that those interests do relate to me rather than another member of the family.
Could we correct that?
Could we correct it, please?
Yeah, correct that, that's no problem. Right, item number 12, the exclusion of the public and the press, and switch the video off as it's there. Once upon a time, I think I'd like to move a resolution or something, didn't it?